Well, welcome back to session number two of Is There Life After Acts for Paul? And Gary, we left off yesterday really with Paul being in Malta, in our review. And the last chapter of Acts really tells how he got to Malta. So I guess as a way of review, and I'll put some maps up here. Talk a little bit of the Acts account of how Paul got from Malta to Rome, because there's a couple things that happened on the way, and then we can sort of pick up. Then I'll pick up on when he gets into the city.
hmm Okay. Um, so they catch a grain ship after wintering there for 3 months, it explains, and they catch a grain ship that had already um, put into winter, even though it had a quick jump up to Rome, relatively speaking, from where it had come in Egypt. And they get a ride there just as people did, or we didn't mention yesterday that there were no cruise ships, no passenger
You know,
ships. You caught a ride on somebody's cargo ship, or you were on a warship, and that meant you had a very specific purpose on that warship. But otherwise, you were as a general population person, you were on somebody's ship that was either doing little coasters, as they called them, little runs, or long runs. And this was a long run one, but they knew better than to get out in that stormy weather, and had safely spent the winter there in Malta, and might have been a regular habit too. Who knows? But anyway, they hitch a ride there, get up to one of the ports that serves the city of Rome, because Rome isn't a
they,
coastal city itself, and it's Puteoli, I believe.
Tuli.
They,
Yep.
they land, and
I,
uh,
I was I was hoping you'd try to pronounce it because I looked over and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah.
I'll just say it that way, and then with confidence, it'll sound like I know what I'm saying. But yeah, I'm sure in Rome they said it differently,
Oh,
but
sure.
in Latin. But anyway, that was one of those great ports for Rome at the time. Kind of I believe that was a newer port, if I'm not mistaken, at the time. And so that was one of those disembarking, and you had to walk. There was still a several hour walk to get from Rome, to get from Puteoli to Rome, and there were stops on the way. And what's fun in this story is it tells us about two of those stops on what's, I think it's, is it the Appian Way that
It's the
we're on?
Appian Way, yes.
The Appian Road, and one of them's Three Taverns, which sounds like a great place to stop. And while they're doing that, people are coming to greet them that are believers.
Yes.
Uh, they know somehow that he's there, and he's coming, or they've been either forewarned or somehow, some way, we don't know. He didn't call him, didn't text him or anything. Couldn't do that.
It
So
pro-
somebody
it's,
ran interference for him, and got there fast, and said, "Hey, they're on their way."
obviously it was probably Snapchat.
That's it.
I'm
Yep.
sure that's what they use.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Or email
so I
like the
mean,
old days.
uh, so, yeah, it's probably bird chat. I don't know.
That's right. Pigeon chat.
So he's coming up, and again we have a map on in the outline, and he's coming up the Appian Way, and like you say, he's walking and he's meeting people along the way. They're having discussions. I mean, and
Mhm.
he's in a pretty good place when it comes to the relationship that he has with these Roman guards that have made the trip with
Right.
him.
That's right.
And
Julius, the
yep,
centurion who he's with, gained his trust along the way, realizing Paul knew what he was talking about the sailing and all kinds of things, as well as back when he really knew he didn't have a prisoner who's uh, an offender of hadn't broken any Roman laws. He was just in custody to keep him safe, basically, from the Jewish opposition that was after him. And so, he had a friendly, really a friendly person, and somebody who I think bears mentioning that as a tent maker, one of the main customers were centurions and tribunes because they provided tents for their men or repairs for the tents, etc. So Paul, probably from the family business, knew well how to banter with a centurion and Roman soldiers, and had longstanding relations. My guess would be. So, this in this case, this was just another person that he was able to get to know well, and that was a culture. I think he had an in for evangelism, and that proves through, as we will read in Philippians tomorrow. Uh, I'll just give that as a hint because it comes up.
Yep. Well, I mean, I think it's key to remember that Paul, was a bivocational missionary.
Amen.
So when
Right.
he's out there, and you think that all he's doing is basically, going into the synagogues or going into these house churches and talking, but he was still a tent maker, and
Right.
so like you say, he's used to being with the crowd that buys tents. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So, we call them, when we go to Walmart, we call them Walmartians, but when it's tents, it's, Roman guards. It's the
That's
Romans.
right.
So he comes in. He comes up this way. He comes up the Appian Way. It's going to be interesting when he comes into the city. Most likely, it's a bustling city. They're just a group of people. I can't remember, what was the number, about 200 at that point,
What's that? The
that was on the
Christians?
ship.
Oh, on the ship, it was like 260, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken, something like
S-
that.
So, I assume that the mass majority of those are making the trip all the way to Rome. That may not be, but this is no small company coming into Rome.
Sure.
But then they probably wouldn't have been all that noticed either. You know what I mean?
A
Because
city of 1 million people at the
yeah.
time, it's estimated, and so you might be coming in one of the main gates. So if you were a business or somebody around the main gates, you might take notice of it. But people were coming in and out all the time.
So he's going to come in. This group is going to come in, really led by Julius, and they're going to come into basically that the headquarters there,
Mm-hmm.
which I need to get my map out here, uh, and I can barely read my map. So they come into where, what is the port, Porta Colossa? Is that was the barracks for the Praetorian Guard, or
Mm-hmm.
Casa?
Yeah. Let's see. In our, you've got it right here. Porta Capena.
Porta Capena, yes. So this is where the main sort of guards, or Roman military, is in Rome. And the picture that you have on the outline shows the river that's coming through it, and then you can see where it's just sort of down in that, what, north, sort of northeast quadrant. That would, and so Julius is going to come, and he's going to present Paul as a prisoner to the soldier there, which again is an officer, a captain, however you want to say it. He's like an administrator for the Praetorian Guard, and obviously, because of what we read, Paul was able to basically check in and say, okay, guys, go find yourself, go rent your own apartment, check back in, because we're not taking care of you. You're not that much of a threat to us, but you're under arrest, and we're going to, we're going to give you a house guard. I mean, is that pretty much what we've got here?
I believe so, and I think connecting the dots we've been talking about, the people that greeted Paul,
Hmm.
uh, who they may have sent some. Maybe they sent Aristarchus in faster than anybody else, or who knows how. Or in the 3 months while they were at Malta, there may have been some way to get word there, but they knew they were coming, and those people may have helped uh, rent something or get something already that Paul could be a part of, or Paul knew Priscilla and Aquila, uh, who were from Rome and fellow tent makers. And maybe they had connections for him, that maybe some of these people were those connections in the Christian community. And they were able to, they might have had a benefactor. Somebody could have said, hey, I've got a apartment building I own, and I've got some apartments that you can use. And but that's what they indicated is there's rented lodging, and the great majority of people in Rome at that time were renting or living in apartments.
Well, and I think it's key in some aspects, and we'll talk about people here later on.
Mhm.
But we know from church history, we also know, just from what we see in the epistles, Peter is in Rome.
Yeah.
And most likely, to the folks that we see later on is Demas and Mark, John Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark. They seem to have been in Rome already. So, and when you start to pull apart what we'll do tomorrow with the epistles, you see that people knew Paul was still alive. He had to have send notes from, letters from Malta out, because when he gets to Rome shortly thereafter, there seems to be a lot of people coming in. You know what I
There's a
mean? That
welcoming committee,
Yeah.
and there's hospitality being extended.
And so again, if you take a look at the map on your outline, one of the things on the city itself that's important is you'll see where these barracks are. You'll see the river. Well, the Christian community was in what was probably be considered the slums, which was across the river. And there's a bridge pretty close to where the barracks are, and the Christian communities across the river, and that's going to come into key. That's probably where Paul, found an apartment. I think that's a decent assumption. um, what's going to come into key and sort of telegraphing and telling you a little bit what's coming is when the fire happens in 64. This slum area that's across the river, where we know the Christians hung out, but where we probably Paul had his apartment, well, that doesn't get burned down, which is one of the reasons that Nero basically sits there and says that, well, the Christians did it, and let's blame them. So there's a lot of setting up that's going on here with Paul coming in. And it's very interesting. He would have had a house guard probably in his apartment, but he was pretty free. And obviously, he paid for his own accommodations. And we'll see that people are coming in and out. It's this is not what the arrest and the prison is at the end of his life. At the end of at the end of this journey that we're taking, he's going to be in a hole in the ground. This is not a hole in the ground that he's in.
Mhm.
So I guess let's talk a little bit about his accommodations. What does an apartment in Rome look like? So it's just like going to Boggy Ford and the new apartments, the complex that's right there, right? Pool on the side and everything.
Actually, it's not very far away, because the basic architecture, and we're going to show some illustrations from some one particular famous book is David Macaulay's City. He also did it as a documentary, uh, so worth checking out if you can see it. But it's built in that what's considered the Mediterranean floor plan, where there's a open space in courtyard in the middle, or an atrium, and then the apartment building is built in a square around it, and they were anywhere from 2 to 5 stories in height. I've even heard 7 stories, but 2 to 5. And remember, there's no escalators or elevators in that day. And so the higher you went in the apartment, the less the rent was. Not, it wasn't the penthouse thing like now, where the higher the apartment, that could be the luxury one. Uh, this was you were walking 4 or 5 flights of stairs to get to your apartment for those inexpensive ones. No plumbing, no kitchen. There was lots of amenities that we assume. So you had to make accommodation for that. And I won't go any further with that. But
Wait a
they
second. No,
stove up there.
no dishwasher. Is that what you're going
No
at?
dishwasher. No. No washer dryer.
The worst thing is uh, no toilet.
No plumbing. Yeah, so you probably had a bedpan, and had to go empty it out every once in a while. But that's just reality. And I think the fun thing about knowing about apartments in Rome is we in our century just think that's something from relatively recently, or at least from the last maybe 2 3 centuries with urban and industrial development. But hey, 2000 years ago they had apartments and people lived in those apartments, and uh, it was life together, with neighbors and all. um, we don't know what Paul had, and you could have a whole floor to yourself. On the usually the second floor was more of an accommodation like that, and often that was the people that on the ground floor owned the shops, or at least one of the shops, and they made let's say it was the tent maker shop. Well, the tent making owner could be living on the second floor, and but on the first floor they had the shop and all the materials, and the place where you would go in to buy them, and then on up. So uh, and
You,
so Paul, if he pooled his resources, or if they had to use their own resources, Luke, Aristarchus, he could have had a bigger place, and afforded it. If it was a benefactor, well, what it was, what it was. But
well, I
that's
mean,
mostly the
we're going to
guess.
find out he has a lot of people coming in and out. So
Absolutely.
he probably did have a good space. As you're sitting there describing this, I'm thinking of the domain where you go
Yes.
and you
Bottom
see
floor is a shop or restaurant, whatever.
that new corner building there that is like a triangle where you have shops
Yeah.
in the bottom, the apartments there, and then the middle's all open.
Exactly. Return to a walking city,
Yeah.
essentially. You got it. And if you go to the Italian restaurant, you got that Roman flavor right there. Mandola's has a place in the triangle. Anyway, I'm getting hungry. Uh, so the other part of it is that you mentioned people were coming for Bible study. He'd invited uh, uh, the local Jewish population who hadn't believed Jesus was Messiah yet, as well as the other Christians. I'm sure were coming too, the other Messiah believers, and whether Gentile or Jew. And he was having them, come and listen to him teach. And if they had a whole floor, well, they probably could have dedicated a particular room or area. If they uh, wanted to, they could use the atrium area in that courtyard and do that kind of teaching. Some of the people I was reading about apartment life there is most everybody was out of their apartments during the day, working, doing whatever they did. And so they wouldn't be bothered too much during the day by somebody having a Bible study. And for my thinking, Paul probably wouldn't consider it a bother. He'd consider it an evangelism tool, having a Bible study out in the open atrium where other people that were just passing by, or other people that are in that area in the building,
Yeah.
uh, could hear what they were talking about.
Well, and I don't think that we know for certain that Aquila and
Priscilla,
Priscilla and Aquila were there at this time. I mean,
right? In fact, they're not.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
you're correct. But
But
they had been there, and that was the
yeah.
kind of their. That I'm sure they knew the Christians and some of the people that might have been there
Oh,
that
without a
returned, because
doubt.
some people did return.
Oh yeah,
Of
yeah, and
course.
we'll talk about that here in a second. But I'm just, Paul, he's got a guard with him. We know that, um,
Indeed.
and the idea that he's in this community, and it's really what it is. It's an apartment community. People are coming in and out. There's shops going on. I mean, there's so much that Paul could have been doing at this time. And again, some of it is speculation from a standpoint. I mean, is he doing helping out with tent making at that time? You don't know. It, it wouldn't be surprising if he was, because that seemed to be his style. But when we talk about and you see then what's going on, and we'll talk a lot more this in the next session about the development of the four epistles that were written in Rome. uh, we get people coming from, I mean, everywhere. There's people from Philippi, there's people from Colossae coming, there's people that were already in Rome coming. There's a slave that basically escaped and found Paul. I mean, he's known. I mean, it's like today, it's like putting your flag out for who you voted for. Everybody knows Paul is here. How is that even possible for somebody that is under house arrest, for everybody to know where he is?
Hmm. Well, with house arrest, you might think back to the description of the house arrest in Caesarea
Mm.
before they got here. Uh, the description was that it was custody. This is Acts 24:23. He was in custody, but he had some liberty, and he was able to have friends attend to his needs. And so, with the liberty or the freedom, that meant, hey, he might be able to roam here and there as long as the guard goes with him. And by the way, the guards changed evidently every 4 hours. So it wasn't the same person all the time necessarily. He had a group of people that were probably in that rotation that he got to know, and uh, uh, kind of followed him around as if he was going anywhere. And then the the people that are friends have that freedom to come and go as well as they're getting his needs going. Well, Paul is an international person.
Yeah.
He's always sending people off to different countries, different parts of the empire, different cultures, and they're also communicating with him because they're looking to him as a mentor and help to uh, solve some of the problems in their congregations, and look to him for advice. So uh, he's, since it's house arrest and he's not convicted of a serious crime. He's not even being held for any serious crime. He's just being held because some other folks said he did something in their country, and he said, well, and they wanted to keep him safe since they knew he was a Roman citizen. So anyway, it is very much a he's renting his own place. He's possibly working, like we said. So he has that freedom of communication where he can speak to people from all over the world, and he's sought after by people all over the world.
Now, I don't know if this is in the outline or if it's for another day. After a while, it all sort of mends together. But Rome is under Nero at this point,
That's correct.
but Nero, I guess, hasn't. I guess the easiest way to say it is he hasn't quite gone off the rails yet.
Yes.
So there's not at this time a lot of angst between Rome and Christians and Rome and the Jews at this point. So
Mhm.
it's
True.
it's a pretty calm environment, at least in the 60 AD.
Absolutely. It's not until about 62 when the wheels apparently start to come off,
Yeah.
more apparent to everybody else, and that's when Burrus and Seneca are. Burrus dies, and Seneca basically kind of retires, and a whole new crop of leaders that I'd call it maybe the cabinet
Yeah.
for Nero take over, and the that's when the it just gets wild. But until then, actually, like the in reading about Josephus, some more literature from the first century, and from a time that overlaps here. Uh, Josephus met Nero's uh, girlfriend at the time, would become his wife, Poppaea, and she was very, how would you say it? She was very embracing of the Jewish population, and so she put in a good word for the Jews with her husband Nero at the time, or Bo at the time, and and Josephus found a friendly audience there when he had gone there to argue for some Jewish priests that were being held in Rome that had been taken from Caesarea again there by the governor, sent by the governor under harsher possibilities than Paul was in, possibly. But no matter, Josephus was there as a member of the priestly families to go pull these guys out, and evidently he was successful with that. So yeah, at the time things were not blowing up yet, but there are little hints here and there, and
Yeah.
that's for another discussion.
It is, but I think just understanding that this 2-year period that Paul is in Rome, he is for a prisoner fairly free,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the environment is fairly calm.
Yes.
People are coming in and out from basically around the area to see Paul.
Hmm.
And talk briefly, because we will do a whole session on this. But Seneca in particular, who is this guy? Because he comes into play, and you can go as far as you want as far as telegraphing on how that relationship with Paul goes. We'll get into it, I think in
Hmm.
2 or 3 lessons, but just so people understand who Seneca is in
Hmm.
relationship to Paul and in relationship to Nero.
Well, actually, he's from Spain.
Ah.
His family's
Hmm.
from Spain, but in Rome, his family had become fairly important in that, for instance, he had a brother who Paul meets, had met earlier in Ephesus, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
and that but off over in Asia Minor. And so it was interesting to see he was a governor, or at least a important person in the place he was for the Roman government. And then Seneca here is the cabinet member who's doing the uh, some of the main work. Now, what how it all started was Nero was only what, 17
Yeah, he's young.
when he was given the emperor's designation. And so you got here a young teenage kid who doesn't quite know his way around, and he needed some guidance. And they surrounded him with the family, the Augustan family surrounded him with this person. Seneca was already a noted scholar, rhetorician, speaker who was famous for his speaking and his writing about speaking. And he's even got some relatives that are a poet. Lucan was a famous poet of the time. So this is somebody that people generally know about, and Paul being somebody who had some what would you say, familiarity with rhetoric. The more they study his letters, the more each of his letters follows a certain pattern of
Oh yeah.
rhetorical oratory or in the written form,
Yeah.
and they're uh, usually fairly impressed with his ability to use what he knew. So this is somebody that Paul's got lots of interest in. Burrus is the person he's going to deal with his house arrest and legal matters,
Yeah.
but there's no, to me, and we'll talk. We're just going to mention it again. I bet he took that opportunity also to try to at least see and hear, if not meet, Seneca, because there's a connection to Spain, for instance, that
Well,
Paul.
and that's what I want to leave a couple of breadcrumbs, which is basically we've got this Seneca character who Paul has met his brother, okay, and his brother has been with Paul, so there's a connection there. He's from Spain, like we said yesterday. Paul stated that he wanted to get to Spain, and he would see these folks as he was going to Rome to
Mhm.
ultimately get to Spain. Boy, it seems awful convenient that all these stars are aligning. Um,
Yeah,
it's it's almost like it's providential in some way.
yeah, amen.
um, so let's talk a little bit about the team, because we know Aristarchus and Luke came with Paul, to Rome, okay, and we know Luke is this researcher that's doing a lot of work right now. He's had a lot of time with Paul in Caesarea to sort of gather both the accounts of Acts and also obviously the accounts of Luke. So, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow, but he's got some time to do stuff. But then we see these uh, uh, Epiphresa, Freza.
Epaphras.
I
Epaphras.
practiced the pronunciations. These I have it phonetically spelled here, and I still screwed it
Still,
up.
you still didn't get it.
So you got
Epaphras and
these.
Epaphroditus. Which
Yes,
one?
we've got these two guys, and they are two, even though they, some scholars will look at these two guys as one, but we see that uh, Epiphres, Frez, the first one, came to Rome from.
I would give you nicknames. So
Okay. Epi and
Epaphras. Yeah.
Epiphrase. Oh man, I'm telling you, I worked so hard on trying to learn these pronunciations, and I've just messed them up already. We got
Yeah,
these two guys. We got the
there's
from
Frass and Fro. How about
Brass
that?
and Fro. There you
Frass
go.
and Fro.
So we've got one that came from Colossae to Rome, and we've got another that came from Philippi to Rome. And what's interesting is they're coming, but they're going to pick some stuff up and just end up going back. And then we've got some guys also that are there. We've got Onesimus, uh,
Onesimus.
Onesimus. Oh, I tried so hard. Titicus, I can get Titicus and Timothy. So we got this.
Timothy. Good, good.
I got that one. So we've got these three guys that are there,
That's right.
and then
And let's talk about Onesimus for a minute, or do you want to cover
well,
everybody?
let me finish these two real quick, because
Okay.
then we find out that Demas and Mark are there.
Mhm.
So right now you've got 9 people in this circle
Mhm.
that is
Plus
there.
Paul, 10, and the guards that are with him. Yeah,
So I mean, you've got a big
network.
group here, all
That's
right,
who we know about.
and you know that they're doing stuff for Paul.
Mhm.
Paul's busy. We'll find out about that too, next week. But go ahead, let's talk. Open it up now that we've got these guys sort of identified.
Mhm.
What are they all doing? Who are these guys?
And that's his international network again.
Yeah,
Some of these people were on that team, like Aristarchus, we talked about yesterday.
you say it
Were
so nicely.
Oh, and it goes all the way back to his travels and his
Yeah,
missionary work.
Yes.
and then taking him to Jerusalem for that collection and to be on the team to represent their church with the mother church, if you will, in Jerusalem. So, um, and some of these, like Onesimus, that's an amazing story that the little letter of Philemon tells. Here's a runaway slave who's in Rome. That
Yeah.
was a common thing for slaves to do, was to end up in Rome, because we talked about Nero there for a while. The first 7 years of Nero's reign seemed fairly stable, and interesting things were happening. And freed slaves in Rome were taking on important jobs and tasks. There was a freedom process that could happen, that owners could uh, have their slave become a freed person, and then they would be able to be their own person legally and be off in the place. Well, Rome was so big, and there were lots of freed slaves as well as runaway slaves that could lose themselves in the big city. That was a common place for them to go, and somehow, some way, Onesimus bumped into somebody of Paul's group, or Onesimus, like the prodigal son, decided, man, it's not what it was cracked up to be. I'm in deep, and
Yeah.
he sought Paul out, possibly, because he knew Paul knew his uh, master, or at least knew about his group, and uh, Epaphras might have been instrumental in that as well. He might have bumped into Epaphras,
Yep.
who had founded the church, or probably was the church planter in Colossae, and Onesimus found a friendly face, whether or if he was in deep, if he was just trying to hide out and he saw somebody that knew him. Oops.
Well, I mean, the relationships here are absolutely amazing, and you try to like relate it to your own thing, and I think of when doing disaster relief,
Mm,
all of a sudden, your group is together, and you're in some godforsaken place in Port Arthur, and then all of a sudden, these people that live in Austin that you work with all the time, but it's sort of the reverse thing. We go on the road like that, but your team comes
mhm,
together and it's like all of a sudden, boom, you're at to
mhm.
work. But
This is
there,
an international team
yeah,
on on mission,
on
but
mission.
their mission's to keep Paul and the churches and the evangelism that's going on all over the world running. And and
And I can speak for myself when that group comes together, there's such a comfort, a peace by
mm,
that
mm,
all those relationships being back. It's there. There's a lot of unspoken. We went through a lot of stuff together in the past, type thing, where boom, we're all back together again, and we're great. And you're right. This is not a group of people that have just gotten together. There's years, if not a decade worth of experience that they experienced together. And it's interesting because they all sort of flock to Paul, because really uh Aristarchus and Luke came with him.
mm,
Demas and Mark, we know, were probably in Rome, and then
be
these
there.
other five sort of come there, to
Mhm.
and what an amazing story, and it unfolds in the scripture, as these four letters, like never, like it's just amazing from that aspect, because you read these greetings, you read these benedictions at the end of these epistles, where Paul is saying, "Hey, these folks greet you," and
Mhm.
then you take these folks and follow their story, and it's like, good night. They've been with him for a long time.
Mhm.
And yeah, if I'm a runaway slave, and a runaway slave from what, Colossae, uh, who probably heard the gospel from Paul or from his master, because hey, we know that Paul knows the owner.
The church is meeting in his home, that he's serving in,
Yeah.
or somebody's along the way that he maybe got taken to.
and with the Philemon letter, you can imagine this conversation with Omina.
Onesimus,
Yes, Onesimus.
Simus.
You can imagine the conversation of him with Paul and the group there, and Paul's like, "You need to go back," which is the whole letter of Philemon.
Mhm.
You,
You're going to
you
do
need
the right thing.
you
And
got to do the
Paul and he evidently grew close because Paul calls him a son
yeah.
in the Lord in that way, somebody that's near and dear to his heart. So
So, but I mean, just this team is just it's amazing, and we're going to learn more about them because uh, they don't go away. Meaning, Paul sends them on mission, but it's like this big magnet that they're always getting back together. Even when Paul is on the run, we're gonna find out that some of these folks are gonna be back and be left, at certain spots. So um,
there's something to recognize about that too. Is that I think a lot of people today, as well as then, got irritated at Paul
yeah,
and hated his guts and wanted to do him in.
yeah.
And still today, there's people that just want to throw him out. And even the ones he wrote, that's throw it out. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
agree with it. But there's also this, which we tend to overlook, and this is what we're talking about, this extreme loyalty, this social network
Yeah.
of people who, and they're not held together by Paul necessarily. It's Jesus that's the main character here, and the Holy Spirit, it's God. But Paul had to have an ability to have personal relationships with these people that he's also working with, to have them be so loyal and want to stick with him in through thick and a lot of thin. So I think he's in many ways a magnetic personality in ways we don't appreciate often. And so yeah, good
Well,
point.
magnetic, polarizing, however you want to put it, and
Because
you're right.
if magnets are put a certain way, they'll want to flee each other too, huh?
But I mean, we'll learn a lot more about this group. This is really just sort of laying a little bit of the groundwork of this group. And one thing, and I know you're gonna talk about Mark a little bit as we sort of wrap this lesson, because this lesson's a little bit shorter, just because it's really two parts. We'll continue in Rome, in the next session, but you know, this relationship that Paul has with John Mark, you always think of it as being patched up in Second Timothy, because in Second
Mhm,
Timothy, Paul
mhm,
says, "Hey, bring Mark, pick up Mark, bring him with me because he's useful for
mhm,
me." But I always personally thought, okay, at the end of Paul's life, he and Mark got back together, but no way. I mean,
mhm,
Mark is all over the place in his trip here in Rome,
mhm,
because again, Mark is probably with Peter. Peter is in Rome, or basically in and around Rome. So talk about Mark, because I know you had something that you wanted to speak of with Mark, and just
mm.
this relationship that he's had his ups and downs with Paul, and obviously he's tight with Peter, and Paul and Peter, have that sort of love. I don't want to call it love hate, but they have it love and sort of, hey, get right with me type
Yeah,
type
they little
relationship.
tension there, but
Yeah,
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 but also great agreement, like
yes,
from the chapters 9 and 10 with
yeah,
Cornelius type thing, and uh, which was in line with and kind of previewing God's call to the Gentiles that Paul would be having. So yeah, 9, 8, 9, 10. Those chapters are interesting because they've got them working in the same mission field, though. Uh, Peter's a little more out of his element, we think, but here he's in Rome,
Yeah.
and so yeah, who knows? Well, anyway, so yeah, 6 to 8 years before Paul's uh, end of life kind of swan song letter with Second Timothy, uh, we're talking about Mark being there and giving greetings. Actually, in Colossians chapter 4, the letter that's to that whole church, he says Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. So he's very specific. This is John Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. That connects to the book of Acts. Uh, and he says he greets you, but he also, there's a little parenthetic statement here where he says, concerning whom you have received instructions, if he comes to you, welcome him. And depending on how you say that, you can say, and if he comes to you, welcome him this time. Because before, Paul might have said, "No, you know that story," and he must have sent instructions along that he didn't write, but with the letter bearer that says, "Hey, Mark," and we patched it up. We're back. We've made peace with each other from, well, from what's that? Well, in Acts chapter 15, Barnabas and Paul have a sharp disagreement, or not so little disagreement, as Luke likes to put things, overtaking John Mark on the second missionary journey. And actually, Barnabas and Paul split their partnership in mission at that point, and we don't know whatever happened to that one because we don't have that reconciliation here. But uh, John Mark, it was over John Mark, because on the first missionary journey, and that's you'll find that in 13:13 in the book of Acts. Uh, Mark ditches him when the going's gonna just about to get tough on that missionary journey. John Mark takes back off for Jerusalem and for home, and they need him, and he's kind of ditched him. So Paul didn't find that. Well, see, he's Barnabas's cousin or kin, and so Barnabas gave him a little more slack. And Barnabas was the encourager and probably a little more easily to forgive anyway. But Paul hadn't really forgiven him about that. And when Barnabas says, "Let's take John Mark on missionary journey too," Paul's like, "No way!" And he's so uh, firm about it that they part ways. They pick other assistants and take off. John Mark goes with Barnabas, and then Paul takes Silas, and they take off. So it's one of those things. So when we get here that he's greeting and receive him, welcome him, and then we find out he's again in Philemon being greeted. And those two letters that we're going to talk a lot more about next week. Philemon's to that one household, and the letter to Colossians to that whole church. Mark is mentioned in both as being part of the team. In fact, he's mentioned with Aristarchus and Demas and Luke and Epaphras in that same sentence of greeting. There's that core team right there, and Mark's included in there. One other thing to think about there, you have two gospel writers right there, Luke and Mark, on the team working together there in and out of Rome. So anyway, when Mark goes get, gets in reconciliation with Paul, Paul shows a level of forgiveness and a level of that personal style, I think, again, that was engaging, that he could even forgive in that sense. So a lot of people see him as being stubborn and unforgiving from the argument with Barnabas, but now we're dealing with a Paul that's a few years later, and he's probably realizing, I need to, there's some forgiveness that I need to give, both for himself, get rid of that poison of anger that he's held over the years, as well as to see the potential in this person and find him to be helpful and useful in the ministry. In fact, he says of in Colossians, in the next verse, he says of Mark, he's one of the three people that brings him great comfort. So there's something special in that relationship, and it's so great to see that arc come back around for
Well,
Paul and Mark.
well, you look at just the personality of Paul, and he, to me, um, I mean, obviously a fiery, passionate human being. Okay,
Mhm.
he's on fire for the Lord. Okay, and when he's on fire for the Lord, boy, it's sort of really black and white. You know what I mean? You're with him or you're not with him. And if
Mhm.
you're not with him, you're going to get, what
Get
he
your eyebrows singed, right,
well,
from
you're going
the
to get
fire.
turned over to the devil, which we talked about before for reproof. That's interesting. But he's also one though that you see. Uh, he is, I think, fairly quick once he's forgiven someone, which we see in this case that there is a reconciliation with Mark. When he's quick to forgive, he it's forgotten. You know what I mean? Because there is like you say, a love, a brotherly love, a fatherly son love, a mentoring love, however you want to put that with Mark, and it really matches what we talked about in Acts, the different missionary journeys and how Paul changed his leadership style,
Mhm.
which is a great example of basically, mentoring discipleship, if you want to look at it, where he's setting these people up to be the next generation of him. You know what I mean? So he's not just doing it all himself. He's preparing Timothy. He's preparing Titus. Obviously, he has a trust for Mark, and we know, well, church tradition tells what we think what happened with Mark after all this. But I mean, there and Mark is a linchpin between Paul and Peter that I don't think we fully
Mm.
appreciate is probably a good way to say it, because I mean he is very close to Peter, and he is part of the team with Paul.
Mhm.
And what we're going to find out, like you say, there's two gospel writers sitting here right now.
Mhm.
uh, with Paul, we've got a big chunk of the New Testament sitting in the same apartment
Mhm.
together.
That's
And
right.
here's the thing, probably a few neighborhoods away is Peter, and not that far away it is John. So we got we got amazing things happening, and not so far away from that is Matthew.
Mhm.
So this little region that's going on in this little group of people, whew,
Mhm.
uh,
Powerful. And
it's
of the two gospel writers, Mark, if indeed he's the youth who somebody tries to grab in the
yep.
Garden of Gethsemane, and the person lets them grab the clothes, and he dashes off.
Oh yeah,
Uh, he was there.
he was there.
He saw Jesus. He had some sort of relationship with Jesus, and so of the two gospel writers, here's somebody who very possibly, was in the presence of and had a relationship of some sort with as a young guy, as a
Yeah.
young buck.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, I fully believe that the scripture tells us enough that John Mark is the one with the pitcher. You know what I mean? He's in the upper room. His mother is there. That's her place. And yeah, listen, you don't put the boy losing his coat, running away naked in there for no particular reason.
That, that's just a little, what do you call that? A little Easter egg,
That's
so to
well,
speak, in the Easter story.
in the Easter story. So there we go. We've reached the end of this lesson, but we haven't reached the end of Rome.
Not yet.
There's a we split this lesson into two, mostly because we're going to get the writings, the true scriptures that are happening here. So we set up Paul's in his apartment.
Mhm.
You know, he's under guard, but with a lot of freedom, and he has a core team here. And next, we find out what that core team is going to do.
Amen.
So,
So, want me to pray us out?
yeah, now you have something scheduled here, right?
I did. I pulled. Yeah, well, it's allergy season for me. October, November. November in the past is when I've actually lost my voice from the molds that
Oh
come,
yeah.
the other things adding to it. And right now, there's even red berry juniper out there raising its ugly head early. Usually, it doesn't happen until December. So put all that together, and I'm dripping and excuse me. I hate to cough in the middle of it, but I don't have a. I guess I could use a mute button somewhere to mute my coughing, but I'm
Oh,
not
listen, it's like you were preaching in the pulpit. If you're gonna cough, you're gonna cough, and you know what?
gonna happen.
That's gonna
So
happen.
yeah. So from the Prayer Bible by Townsend and Zook, they had a great prayer about Mark and Paul. So I wanted to share that as our prayer today. Uh, it starts. Paul was critical of Mark because he left Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary trip. Paul refused to take Mark on the second journey and split fellowship over the issue. But here Paul has forgiven Mark. Paul learned that at times the work is bigger than the worker, and also forgave those who abandoned him. Uh, Lord, take bitterness out of our hearts against any who have offended us. May others forgive me and us for our offenses. Teach us to love your people, both those faithful and unfaithful, and keep us faithful. In the name of that Lord we all serve, Jesus Christ. Amen.
It's beautiful to get examples of Mark and Peter in the Gospels and in the New Testament because they are human.
Mhm.
And
Two people you wouldn't expect to get back together in any cooperative effort of work, and here they are.
here they are.
Mark, because
At,
Mark, what I love about that prayer too is Mark had to forgive Peter.
oh, sure.
Excuse me, forgive Paul
Yeah,
for what he had said about him.
sure.
And so, yeah, there's lots going on there, and the prayers recognized that. So,
Gotta love it. Well, there we go. We got another one in the books, and
well,
go
and
ahead.
I was going to say one thing. I'll correct myself. Gallio, who was Seneca's brother, was in of all places, and I should remember this, Corinth, because
Corinth.
Corinth plays such a huge role all the way along. And it wasn't Ephesus, it was Corinth. So,
Well, listen, if you have to apologize for that, I'm still trying to figure out how to pronounce these names that in my notes, I listened to it over and over again, put it out phonetically, practiced it, and then when we get to it, I can't even read my own typing. I'd like to say it was writing, but I typed it out. There you
you're
go.
forgiven. You're forgiven.
All righty. Until next time, we'll see you.
Blessings. Thank you.